Welcome back to Matt's Investing Corner. It's been a while since I made a video, but I'll try to keep it up in the next coming weeks or months. The video you just saw was from Petrobras. Petrobras is, in my eyes, a very interesting company to have in your portfolio. I currently have it in my own and I have a considerable position in it. I'll explain in this video why I think Petrobras is a very interesting stock to have in your portfolio, especially if you want to diversify a bit. So basically, Petrobras is a Brazilian majority state-owned multinational corporation in the petroleum industry, and they have a headquarters in Rio de Janeiro. The name derives from Brazilian Petroleum Corporation, and this is where Petrobras is from. I just would like to quickly show you where to find Petrobras. So if you are in the Giro, for example, in your broker platform, you type in Petrobras and you will find a number of different results of Petrobras. Some of them are US dollar traded and some of them are in euro. And what you will find as well is that some of these products have an ADR. An ADR basically stands for American Depository Report or receipt, and basically what that means is you're trading a product, a company that is actually originally traded in a different exchange. Well, this is a Brazilian company and I believe they are being traded in reais, and in order to trade them in a more liquid currency, they offer these kind of companies into an ADR, American Depository Receipt, and that's basically how you can trade Petrobras in US dollars. So the one that I have a reasonable position with is this one, and you can see the ticker, the trade symbol here, PBR, and I have a position of close to 2,000. And what you can see here is basically the company with all the details that you want to do your research on. Okay, so next I would like to give you a couple of reasons why I think investing in Petrobras would be an interesting opportunity. So the first thing is with Petrobras is that they have low cost production and large reserves. So Petrobras is in a region operating whereby they have access to wells and significant reserves whereby they can produce, explore and produce E&P, crude oil against rather low costs. And that's compared to other big oil companies, not always the case. From what I understand, in their report, they have a production cost of around $22. Everything higher in oil price that is currently being traded on top is basically, if you have an oil price currently of $60, $70, that means that around $40, $50 is profit more or less into their account, because their production cost is around 22. So Petrobras has a huge amount of reserves, especially in pre-salt oil reserves, and they start to do more and more also in very high deep wells. Another thing is its oil production has one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world, which might be relevant for some of the more sustainable investors. Another point is the high dividend yield. Petrobras has historically offered a very attractive dividend yield, often among the highest in the energy sector. Well, what you can see here, they're currently in the last year or so giving dividend of approximately 16%. And this can be very appealing. Next to growth of the stock price, you will have on a quarterly basis your 16% ending in cash into your account. If you look in Morningstar and find Petrobras, you will have a section with dividends. And what you can see here is that basically what I was saying about 16% is basically reconfirmed here with the dividend and splits. So currently the dividend trading yield is 16%. For 24 last year, this dividend yield was close to 24%. 23 was close to 20%. 22 was even more staggering, was 70%. And that's enormous. So this is very related as well to the price of oil, of crude. If the high oil price, then there's lots of thick margins and big dividends to be paid out. So What you can see here as well is a track record of the cash dividends that were done by this company in the previous years. You can see that even for 24, there were more than just a quarterly dividend. And this is something that you will see ending up into your cash balance, and a certain moment when it goes ex-dividend, you will see a sort of reservation into your broker account. It will not be directly be able for you to spend, but once the payment date is there, the following day it should be in your cash balance. The next argument is they have a strategic focus on profitable assets. Well, the company's strategic plan emphasizes on maximizing the value of its profitable E&P, the exploration and production assets, particularly in pre-salt region, and it's improving its refining park. What does it mean? Well, in the next coming years, I believe in 25 till 29, they're going to continue to invest in maintaining, having large reserves, and then especially in pre-salt regions. These are regions around the coast whereby they are acquiring licenses to basically dig a hole, do exploration and do production, and whereby they will have certain floating productions and storage operating units, which are enormous factories, floating factories with a drilling rig in it that basically stay above some point in the ocean and drill a big hole and basically start extracting oil, in which they not only extract, they store, and they produce quite often also on board, whereby they potentially already have some refining capabilities. So these are technologies that they're investing in. So they're buying equipment, they're buying basically the floating infrastructure in order to facilitate this. So next point, they have a significant investment plan. Petrobras has outlined a substantial investment plan for the coming years, primarily on the E&P to replace reserves, increase production, advance decarbonization, and they aim to implement the 10 new production systems in 29. Well, basically that goes hand in hand with the previous point. And then next point is leadership in deep and ultra deep water exploration. Petrobras has been almost 50 years of expertise in deep and ultra deep water exploration and production, making it a world leader in this challenging segment. So what does that mean as well? Well, in order to dig, they need to go deeper and deeper, and this means in the ocean that you need to have certain ultra deep water expertise. Petrobras is one of those companies that has been building expertise and has been having a lot of experience in doing so. They have the equipment, they have the right people on board, and this is something that is, especially in these pre-salt regions, rather attractive for them to do the E&P. Last point, potential for growth in Brazilian energy supply. Petrobras aims to maintain its relevance in supplying energy to Brazil, with plans to increase its contribution to Brazil's primary energy supply over the coming decades. So mainly they are still focusing on the oil and gas, but they're also starting to invest as well in renewable and sustainable energy. And this is something whereby, if you look into their investment portfolio, they are really investing just to maintain the production, but also to able to facilitate growth in their production over time, but also into their refining capacity, but also into sustainable energy. And that means that they're putting a big portion of their profits basically into sustainable energy infrastructure. Obviously, I want to also touch the topic of some of the risks that I see of having such a company. And let me quickly go and see what kind of first risks I have. Well, one of the risks is something that does not directly can be directly seen as a risk, but it has a lot to do with how the company works and how they operate and what is it that they do. So This company is a semi-state-owned company. The federal government of Brazil owns more than 50% of the shares. That means that the policies, the execution of what the company does and invests in is highly influenced by what the political parties want the company to do. So the company is a rather big company that generates a lot of cash for taxes for Brazil to just invest in other areas. And this is also what happens. They are basically the cash cow of basically the Brazil economy. And this means that certain investments are really driven not just in the interest of the company, but also in the interest of Brazil. So 50.26% is the ownership of the state. Another risk that I would like to flag is obviously the share price is highly related to crude oil prices. So crude oil is going up and down by demand and supply, but it's also highly driven by local conflicts. And I don't want to go too much into politics, but obviously the effect of Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Iran, and the US, these kind of things are, once that starts to create a lot of noise and be very dominant in the market, this has a direct impact on the oil price. And the crude price of WTI or Brent is directly affected. The more the security of supply is affected and potentially restricted for particular blocks of the world, whereby countries are excluding others from having access to that, or etc., this drives the price up of oil. And when you have an oil company that you're investing in, the price of crude directly affects also the profitability of such a company. So the share price, highly related to crude oil prices, can be a benefit, can be seen as a weakness, but it's something that you should keep an eye on. So you're buying a company, if you would invest in such a company, also with the interest and with the potential expectation that you believe that the oil and gas prices will further go up, which hopefully for you makes more profits in the near future. Another thing is basically you're buying, especially if you buy it in the US dollar, the ADR, then you're buying a company in US currency. What does that mean? Well, you're exposed, especially for the European investors that may want to invest in such a company, they are basically having their income in euros, or in my case in Swiss franc, and basically you're exposed in an FX difference. So what happens in the last 12 months, the US dollar has been dropping significantly. And if you see the US dollar, that means that if you bought like half a year or a year ago US based prices, shares, then you will see that the value of these shares have dropped as well compared to euro or the Swiss franc significantly. And that means sometimes that you may have a plus of 5% because the share price grew 5%. But if the FX difference is 10% down, that means that you will have actually a net loss because the share price dropped because of the difference in FX. Here I just want to show you an example of the position that I had, or I still have, with Petrobras. In the end, I can see that in my unrealized that I have a plus of close to 2,000 in the profit. However, on the currency side, I have a minus of close to 1,943. All in all, I'm still in the profit, but this is due because the US dollar became so weak in the last six months, and this is something that hopefully that will recover in the near future. I'm not going to sell these shares, so I'm expecting that in due time, in half a year or so, that the US dollar will gain some of its strength again. Nonetheless, it's something that I want to flag to you. The moment you start investing in a different currency, you're exposed to that unless you start doing FX hedging. I quickly want to run you through some of the latest quarterly earnings reports from Petrobras. This is the one from Q125. I think it was published in May or so. So one of the things that I would like to showcase with is the dividend is of course very attractive. 16% is enormous. But one of the fears and questions you may ask is that sustainable? Are they able to keep up such a dividend? So if you look at the last quarter, their net income was 4.0 billion. In the previous quarter, in Q4 24, the net income was 3.1 billion. So one thing what you see is already that is very attractive is you see a growth of 30% from last quarter. But that showcases basically positive numbers. There is money being made in this company and significant amount. So a lot of this is actually flowing into dividends for the Brazilian government, but also for the shareholders. So this is something that is quite attractive. What you may see is that compared to last year Q1, there was a higher net income of 5.4. This has something to do with the oil price, and I can show you that in the main items. Here you can see, for instance, the net income of 4.0, 3.1 and 5.4. But here you can see as well that this was done basis the average oil price in US dollars per barrel of in this quarter was 86 or 75 Brent crude, and Q4 this was 74, whereas in a year ago it was 83. So it's almost a difference of $8-9 per barrel that you basically have difference from last year. So the more higher the oil price, the more profit this company makes. So these are the sales revenues, what you can see with a gross profit of around 10 billion and net income of around 4.0. What is interesting as well to see from this is, I think it's in table 7, is the exploration and production. And what you can see here is basically their lifting cost and production, taxes and leases. So this is where basically they explain what is the cost of production of oil in their E&P. And here they basically explain per quarter what the costs are, ranging from $22, between $21 and $22 is basically the cost for them to produce a barrel of crude. So in order for you to understand what the oil price is doing, and when I talk about the oil price, I'm referring to futures of the crude and Brent, WTI. So if you go to market, you scroll down in the Giro and you see here the commodity sections. So here the WTI crude oil is currently being priced for August futures of $66 per contract. And you can see that in the last 3 months that in May and April, this was ranging between $50 and $60, whereas in the last 2 months, in June, July, there was a significant upbeat of the oil price. And why was that? Well, there was the conflict of Iran, Israel, and the involvement of the US. And what you could see is the more that conflict evolved, the more the oil price started to go up. And especially when Iran started to threaten that they would block certain trade routes, and that would hold back certain amounts of huge amount of oil, especially in that area, that caused for oil price to even go up to level of $75. Soon after, you can see that the price dropped. And that was basically because Iran started to back out and started to say, hey, I want to listen to the United States of what they want. And basically you could see that the oil price started to drop back to $65. I don't want to go too much into politics. It's not my expertise, but obviously this goes hand in hand with what is happening in the areas of countries that own a lot of oil and the supply and demand of this product. Next, I would like to also explain a bit more about the PE ratio of Petrobras compared to its peers. So So what you can see here is a graph whereby I worked out what the PE ratio of the last 12 months is. It's basically a trailing PE. And what I could see from the numbers that I can get is that Petrobras is currently having a PE ratio of 7. Whereas if I compare that to companies that are in the same market, in the same segment operating, BP is having a PE ratio of 9, Chevron has a PE ratio of 16, Exxon around 16, Shell is the same ratio, 16, and Total has 10. What does that actually mean? Well, price to earnings. So the price of the company to their earnings in the last 12 months. The price of the company in a share price. So that means that 7 is actually rather low, especially compared to its competition. So if you want to find out if the company that you would like to invest, PE ratio is a very good indicator to find out, compared to its competitors, if this company is overpriced or if it's compared to other price underpriced. What you clearly can see here is that they are one of the lower ones. And in my eyes, this is very attractive to invest in Petrobras. Last but not least, I would like to take you through basically the graph to understand what the price and what the company is doing over time. So what you can see here is the last 3-4 years of Petrobras, how it's moving. And what you can see, the last closing price was, I believe, on Thursday, Thursday was $13.06. That's where it's currently being priced, because on Friday, while I'm recording it, the US market is closed because of the 4th of July. So let's zoom in a bit on the last couple months. So if we look in 2025, we can see that basically the stock was a bit bouncing between a range of 12.5 and 15, and with a sort of downward slope. And then at a certain moment, Trump started to talk more and more about tariffs, and this, of course, dropped the market entirely just across the different industries. And what you can see is suddenly a hard drop towards 12, and you were at a certain moment even able to buy Petrobras in a range of $11. I think that was the lowest levels. In the recent weeks, however, you can see that the share price of Petrobras has been moving rather positive upwards again. And I've just connected some of the highs and the lows together, and what you can see is a bit of a funnel going upwards. Another interesting that I would like to make you aware is this basically this level that I'm marking in a slightly different color is sort of where it has been bouncing off. This is, in my eyes, a sort of resistance that it's currently being held through. What you can see, if we start adding the moving averages, that the stock is moving well above the 50-day moving average. But if you look at the 150-day moving average, it just closed above the 150-day moving average. One of the things that I learned over time is that you should always buy a company when it's above the 50 and the 150 moving day average. So both items, they are basically ticking. Another thing is it in an upward trend? Well, in my eyes, it is. It's moving in an upward trend. What is very interesting to see in the next coming days is if it will be breaking this resistance, this purple line. And if it does so, it will be trying to go back into regions where it was originally already moving. So that's in a range between 13 and 15, maybe $15.50. So that will be very attractive to see that company going back to these kind of levels, especially if you have bought the share around $11, $12 ranges. That, on top of the dividend, makes it, in my eyes, a very attractive company. You get your 16% dividend, and on top of that, there's a huge prospect of the company being productive in generating a lot of return and cash net income. And this is something that, if you look at this, we now looked at basically the fundamentals. We looked at the risks. We looked at the positive outcome with investments. We looked at the dividends. We now look at the share. And in my eyes, this is a very good case of an interesting company that looks very bright to have a potentially a portion in your portfolio, especially if you want to diversify and want to have it in the energy industry. I think Petrobras could be an interesting idea for you potentially to consider. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor. You should always do your own due diligence and do your own research. I'm just sharing my analysis, and you should always, before you take any actions, always ask additional support from any other certified professional that can advise you. Nonetheless, I'm very keen to understand what are your ideas. Is this analysis making any sense to you? Do you have any questions? Do you have any other alternative companies that you think are interesting to invest in? By the way, if you are curious to know what kind of tools and systems I'm using, this is Trade Vision. It's a rather good program. I will be in the near future making a video about this. I will be looking forward to see your replies and your comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.